Hi there. We will look into 20 PMP exam scenario questions based on stakeholder management. My name is Mark. Welcome to PMP Exam Express. Without wasting any time, let's get into it. I hope you are ready. 1. John is managing a project that involves multiple stakeholders with conflicting interests. One key stakeholder has started to express dissatisfaction with the project's direction. What should John do next? A. Ignore the stakeholder since the project is on track. B. Escalate the issue to the sponsor immediately. C. Address the stakeholder's concerns and update the stakeholder engagement plan. D. Remove the stakeholder from the communications list. Answer: C. Address the stakeholder's concerns and update the stakeholder engagement plan. Explanation: Engaging stakeholders effectively involves addressing their concerns and updating the plan. Ignoring or excluding them can worsen issues. 2. Mary has just finished identifying all stakeholders and now needs to determine how to engage them. What document will be most helpful at this stage? A. Stakeholder Register. B. Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. C. Communications Management Plan. D. Risk Management Plan. Answer: B. Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. Explanation: This document helps in assessing the current and desired levels of engagement for stakeholders, guiding the project manager on how to engage each one. 3. During a project review meeting, a previously supportive stakeholder becomes disruptive. What should the project manager do? A. Avoid confronting the stakeholder in the meeting and address the issue later. B. Immediately confront the stakeholder and ask them to leave the meeting. C. Request the sponsor to intervene. D. Calmly address the stakeholder's concerns during the meeting and follow up afterward. Answer: D. Calmly address the stakeholder's concerns during the meeting and follow up afterward. Explanation: It's important to manage conflicts diplomatically in the meeting while planning a follow-up to resolve the issue thoroughly. 4. Laura has identified a stakeholder who is highly influential but has low interest in the project. How should Laura engage this stakeholder? A. Regular updates to keep the stakeholder informed. B. Intensive involvement in all decisions. C. Minimum communication, as the stakeholder has low interest. D. Monitor the stakeholder and only engage when necessary. Answer: D. Monitor the stakeholder and only engage when necessary. Explanation: For stakeholders with high influence but low interest, monitoring is the best approach to avoid overwhelming them with unnecessary information while still being aware of their impact. 5. A stakeholder has raised a new concern about the project's impact on another department. What is the most appropriate action for the project manager? A. Dismiss the concern if it does not affect the project scope. B. Update the stakeholder engagement plan to address the concern. C. Log the concern as a risk and continue with the project. D. Schedule a separate meeting with the stakeholder to discuss the concern. Answer: D. Schedule a separate meeting with the stakeholder to discuss the concern. Explanation: Addressing concerns individually allows the project manager to gather more details and determine the appropriate response. 6. A highly involved stakeholder is constantly requesting project updates that are not within the regular schedule. What is the best approach for the project manager? A. Deny all requests for updates outside the scheduled reporting periods. B. Provide detailed updates whenever the stakeholder asks. C. Negotiate a reasonable update schedule that aligns with both parties' expectations. D. Escalate the issue to the project sponsor. Answer: C. Negotiate a reasonable update schedule that aligns with both parties' expectations. Explanation: It's important to balance stakeholder engagement with efficient communication. Negotiating a compromise ensures the stakeholder feels involved without overwhelming the project team. 7. David has discovered a new key stakeholder that was previously unidentified. What should he do next? A. Update the stakeholder register and develop a strategy to engage the stakeholder. B. Ignore the stakeholder, as they were not originally identified. C. Inform the project sponsor immediately. D. Ask the project team to engage the stakeholder without updating the register. Answer: A. Update the stakeholder register and develop a strategy to engage the stakeholder. Explanation: Newly identified stakeholders should be recorded in the stakeholder register, and a strategy to engage them should be developed. 8. Jane's project is nearing completion, and some stakeholders have begun to disengage. What is Jane's best course of action? A. Ignore the stakeholders, as the project is almost complete. B. Send regular updates to re-engage the stakeholders. C. Review the stakeholder engagement plan to determine if any adjustments are needed. D. Involve the sponsor to force stakeholder engagement. Answer: C. Review the stakeholder engagement plan to determine if any adjustments are needed. Explanation: As the project changes, the engagement strategy may need adjusting to keep stakeholders informed and involved. 9. In the middle of a project, an influential stakeholder changes their expectations. What should the project manager do first? A. Proceed with the original plan since the expectations were set early on. B. Update the project plan to reflect the new expectations immediately. C. Discuss the change with the stakeholder and assess its impact on the project scope and timeline. D. Escalate the issue to senior management. Answer: C. Discuss the change with the stakeholder and assess its impact on the project scope and timeline. Explanation: Changes in expectations should be discussed and evaluated to determine the impact before taking action. 10. Mark is managing a project where a powerful stakeholder is resistant to the project's objectives. How should he handle this stakeholder? A. Try to convince the stakeholder to support the project. B. Document the stakeholder's resistance and ignore their input. C. Understand the stakeholder's concerns and address them in the project's objectives where possible. D. Escalate the stakeholder's resistance to the project sponsor. Answer: C. Understand the stakeholder's concerns and address them in the project's objectives where possible. Explanation: Engaging with stakeholders, understanding their concerns, and trying to address them improves collaboration and reduces resistance. 11. Emma is creating a stakeholder engagement plan and needs to classify her stakeholders. Which factor should she primarily consider? A. Stakeholder availability. B. Stakeholder power and interest. C. Stakeholder influence on the project team. D. Stakeholder communication preferences. Answer: B. Stakeholder power and interest. Explanation: Power and interest are the primary factors for classifying stakeholders. They determine the level of engagement required. 12. During a project update meeting, a stakeholder insists on changing the project's deliverables. What should the project manager do next? A. Agree to the changes and update the project scope. B. Escalate the issue to the change control board. C. Request the stakeholder submit a formal change request. D. Reject the changes to avoid scope creep. Answer: C. Request the stakeholder submit a formal change request. Explanation: All changes must go through the formal change control process. 13. A key stakeholder requests that you add more features to the project without adjusting the timeline. What is the best response? A. Accept the request and work extra hours to meet the deadline. B. Reject the request outright due to time constraints. C. Assess the impact of adding the features on the timeline and scope. D. Escalate the request to the sponsor. Answer: C. Assess the impact of adding the features on the timeline and scope. Explanation: Before making any decisions, the impact of the additional features must be assessed. 14. During a project's execution, a previously inactive stakeholder begins to request frequent updates and more involvement. What should the project manager do first? A. Increase the stakeholder's involvement in all decision-making processes. B. Ignore the stakeholder as they were not involved previously. C. Review and update the stakeholder engagement plan to reflect the stakeholder's new interest. D. Escalate the situation to the project sponsor. Answer: C. Review and update the stakeholder engagement plan to reflect the stakeholder's new interest. Explanation: When a stakeholder's level of interest changes, the stakeholder engagement plan should be updated to accommodate the new level of involvement. 15. Michael is managing a project with a stakeholder who is passive but influential. The stakeholder is not involved in day-to-day activities but can influence key decisions. How should Michael manage this stakeholder? A. Keep the stakeholder satisfied with periodic updates. B. Involve the stakeholder in daily meetings. C. Ignore the stakeholder, as they are passive. D. Send detailed reports on all project activities. Answer: A. Keep the stakeholder satisfied with periodic updates. Explanation: Stakeholders with high influence but low interest should be kept satisfied through periodic updates without overwhelming them with too much detail. 16. Sarah is managing a project that is highly visible to several external stakeholders. During a progress meeting, a stakeholder raises concerns about the project's impact on the environment. What should Sarah do first? A. Escalate the concern to the environmental authorities. B. Update the risk register with the environmental concerns. C. Dismiss the concern, as it is unrelated to the project's main objectives. D. Discuss the concern with the stakeholder and evaluate how it may affect the project. Answer: D. Discuss the concern with the stakeholder and evaluate how it may affect the project. Explanation: Stakeholder concerns should always be addressed. Evaluating their impact on the project is a necessary step before deciding the next course of action. 17. A key stakeholder provides feedback that could improve the project outcome but would require changes to the scope. What is the project manager's best course of action? A. Implement the feedback immediately. B. Ask the stakeholder to submit a formal change request. C. Reject the feedback to avoid scope creep. D. Proceed with the original plan to avoid delays. Answer: B. Ask the stakeholder to submit a formal change request. Explanation: any changes to scope should go through the formal change control process to ensure they are properly evaluated and approved. 18. A project stakeholder has requested a report that the project team does not currently generate. What should the project manager do? A. Ignore the request, as it wasn't part of the initial plan. B. Generate the report without involving the team. C. Assess the impact of generating the report and communicate with the team before taking further action. D. Escalate the request to the project sponsor. Answer: C. Assess the impact of generating the report and communicate with the team before taking further action. Explanation: before providing an additional report, the project manager should assess the impact on the team and decide if it is feasible or necessary. 19. A stakeholder approaches you directly to request changes to a deliverable that is near completion. How should you handle this situation? A. Implement the changes immediately since the stakeholder is key. B. Request the stakeholder to submit a formal change request for evaluation. C. Ignore the request since the deliverable is nearly complete. D. Escalate the request to the change control board. Answer: B. Request the stakeholder to submit a formal change request for evaluation. Explanation: changes should always follow the formal change control process, ensuring that they are properly evaluated and approved. 20. Susan is managing a project where a stakeholder's expectations have not been met due to a misunderstanding in the project scope. What should she do next? A. Adjust the project deliverables to meet the stakeholder's expectations. B. Review the scope with the stakeholder and clarify any misunderstandings. C. Escalate the issue to the project sponsor for resolution. D. Proceed with the original scope, as it was approved at the start. Answer: B. Review the scope with the stakeholder and clarify any misunderstandings. Explanation: it's crucial to clarify misunderstandings with stakeholders early to ensure they are aligned with the project's scope and objectives. Thank you for watching. Please support our channel by subscribing. All the best with your PMP exam preparations.